Welcome everyone to another edition of Drawn Together 2020. Today we have illustrator, caricaturist, journalist, author, educator, lecturer, political commentator, Steve Brodner.
Thank you for having me, and I want you to know how happy I am to see you and all the gang who are my colleagues in this world of making pictures and making pictures of faces. And as I said to Tom earlier in the previous conversation we had, I really do believe very deeply that what we are all doing is not just making faces, but we're also communicating ideas. And every line and every shape in a face is also discussing something about that person, whether consciously or unconsciously. And I'm old now, I'm 65, and I've spent the last 50 years in print, but simultaneously for 15 of those years, I do caricatures at parties in the New York metropolitan area. And on the weekends, or sometimes 4 or 5 parties a week, I go to Long Island, New Jersey, Westchester, sometimes get flown around the country. So it's not too dissimilar to what you do. Never did a theme park, although in the recession, which we now laughingly look at as a two, which was nothing compared to what you guys have now, or we all have now. I drew on the boardwalk that summer. That was the Reagan recession, and before your time, some of you. But I got through it, and eventually I started to click as an illustrator. And so illustrators are really only about telling stories. You have to be even more dedicated to that. But I really do believe that anytime some anonymous person sat down in front of me at a party, I was telling a story about them. I was thinking about, what does that face mean to me? You know, is this guy a slob? Is she a prissy prig? Is this kid a rambunctious uh, armful? Is this the most adorable, pure angel baby you ever saw? Did this grandmother spend 3 hours in front of the mirror doing her face so she could make an appearance? And is it a really stupid idea for me to tear her apart? And this guy with a cigar, shouldn't I just destroy him? And the best parties were the old guys who'd have an old guy party. They used to call them smokers back in the days when you could smoke indoors. And the room would be full of smoke, and they'd be drunk, and they'd want you to tear the guy to each other. Each guy wanted you to tear his friends to pieces. And I've never heard such laughter in my life. The stuff that would horrify people in other parties at a bar mitzvah or sweet 16, here I was brilliant. You think I was Don Rickles or something? The screams of laughter. Very few.
You gotta know your audience, right?
Uh, but it became very clear to me, as you can see by my pictures, that I was ill-suited to this kind of work, and people were not appreciating me as much as I was appreciating them. And I got into illustration, and thank God for a couple of generations now, I've been working in the press. I'm going to quickly run through my career for you, let you see what I've done. Tom will jump in with questions from any old place, from himself or others, and I will stop and answer. Do you have any ones to start with, Tom, before we begin?
Um, yeah, I mean these are. I don't know if there's any good starting point here, and you're already going to be like going through your career, which probably would have been my first question. Here's one that's maybe a good jumping off point. This is regarding like your teaching style. This is from Jared Hobson. How do you help your students find their style or their voice in illustration?
To leave them alone. I want everybody to know that your style is already here. You just have to relax and allow it to come through. And the way to do that is to do many, 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 many pictures. And I was worried about this when I was young for a long time. Like, what's my style? You know, here I'm working pen and ink. Here I'm working watercolor. Here I'm working oil. Here I'm working in scratchboard. And then one day I started to look at some older work, because after a couple of years you have now a collection, and started looking at, and I said, Jesus, it all looks like the same person did it. So, you know, I'm not, I stopped worrying, you know, how I learned to stop worrying and embrace just taking a pencil in your hand and making pictures. So in my caricature class called Caricature Boot Camp at SVA, quick plug, starting in June, uh, we draw from a live model. And I'm going to give you like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different ways of approaching it. Some blind contour, some using something I call shadow hunting, where you just look for shadows. Another one called direct line, which is the more sophisticated one. But we all build up to it. And believe me, you're going to find your voice. You're going to find your own point of view. You just need to relax a little bit. This is better. And and just keep making pictures, keep drawing. And that is the best advice I can give you. Get big fat pads, build them, be ready to do bad ones. Bad ones are your best friend, as I'll show you with my sketchbook in a little while when we get to it. So don't worry about style. And also be very careful about adopting another person's style. If you admire somebody, yeah, copy that person, learn from that person, but understand that it's getting you to some other place. When I was young, I was very influenced by Ralph Steadman and Al Hirschfeld and Thomas Nast and Daumier and Goya. And you can see parts of my work where it was very influenced by those guys. Even today, you can see those people in my work. Uh, I think it's a good thing because it really did get me to my own look. And so I don't think about it, neither should you.
That's great advice. And it actually brings me to another question that someone submitted. This is from Don Pincent. He asks, "Have you ever been miscredited for Ralph Steadman's work, or vice versa? Like, do you yourself see the similarities, and do others sort of see that as well, and maybe accidentally credit you for his, or the other way around?"
People have seen Steadman in me, other people have seen Hirschfeld. They ask me, where's the Ninas? I get, picked up on I get caught out by, by my influences creeping in. In the beginning, I was very Nast influenced. I think people say Stedman because I like to use toothbrush for a while. In the days before computer, I would stick a, do I still have my toothbrush? Where is it? Uh, an Oral 132. Oral B, it's my recommendation.
That's
Uh,
that's your tool of choice.
It's the finest toothbrush for illustration. Like, no, it shows you how far I am. Oh, here it is. This is the Oral B. I don't really use it anymore. I just keep it around. It's an A35. I just keep it in the little container of water just in case I need it.
I'll have to head off to my local art store and pick one up.
The local Dwayne Reed or CVS or something. They're all run by the same company. Anyway, so that's what people think about, spatter. But Ralph and I do very different things. Ralph Steadman does not plan his illustrations. He just takes the brush or the pen and just throws something down. Quite often it starts with a spatter, and then he says, "Okay, what, where's that going? What is that suggesting? Oh, that looks like a bird. I think that's got to be a bird." And he's breaking pen points, and he's this amazing free spirit.
Oh, that's super cool.
I am like sketching and worrying and there's no bird in there unless it came in the beginning. I was planning it, and the bird had to fit in the composition in the right way. And Ralph does not worry, and Steve worries all the time.
So
Steve,
where do you like? How long is the process from like conception to like the final piece when you're planning and sketching and doing these sorts of things?
this is what I'm doing. Now I'm doing a lot of blog posts that take me about a half hour to create, and they're just like I'm drawing the dead. I'm looking at the obits in the New York Times, and I'm saying,
Mm-hmm.
people who passed away from the coronavirus to just sort of not let them pass by so fast. They lived their lives and they also were taken from us by this crisis and by the negligence and the carelessness of powerful people and in the White House. And let's not let them go without seeing their faces for another second or two. So I do those and I'm putting them on my social media feeds on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And also if somebody said something really stupid, I draw that person. Let me put that on the Instagram. But for more detailed things that require watercolor, as an illustrator, the way you work it is either you get the job from an art director at some publication, and they're expecting sketches from you on a schedule. Usually they give you a week or less, and then another week to finish it after the sketches are approved. So that's 2 weeks, but that's not how long it takes you to do the piece because you're lining up a bunch of other assignments. So maybe you're doing this with 4 or 5 other places at the same time. And in my case, I don't wait for them to call me. That's why I'm 65 and I'm still working in this young person's field. I reading the papers and I am getting upset and outraged and I'm pitching stories to publications and I'm saying, hey, let's do this, let's do that, let's do this idea. And they say, usually, no, which you got to expect. That's another part of all of this is rejection. You have to take rejection really well and say, all right, catch you later. Nothing personal. And then I go down the ladder of people, and eventually somebody says yes. And then I have an assignment. And then it's another week in order to do it. I do a mega job every year for Washington Post to wrap up the year. And so I'm pitching that like in October. This is a January job I'm pitching in October with an understanding that I'm going to add more stuff as things happen between October and January. But I'm already beginning it before Thanksgiving, and that gives me 2 months, 2 big months really, to finish it. And I take my time. I'm doing lots of other things in the meantime, but I'm just like every day a couple hours and adding and subtracting and so on. So each job takes its own period of time, and I care mostly about the quality of the thing. I want the characters to live. I want them to be living as actors in a movie in which they're telling the story that I want them to tell. Okay, so you have the power as an illustrator to do that, to create a little movie that has a running time of about a second in the mind of the viewer who's turning a page or looking at a sign on a wall or a website. You really have that power. And if you do a good job, if you tell the story really well, you could burn that little image into someone's head that could last more than a second. It could last 3 seconds. It could last a half hour. It could last a lifetime. I'm sure you all have illustrations you've seen in your lives that you still have not been able to forget. Something like Goya or uh, Daumier or Hirschfeld or Levine or Brad Holland or David Levine. Did I say David Levine? Sorel, any of the great ones. Um, and we shoot for that. We shoot for this amazing ability to crystallize an idea in a form so that it's lasting and sticky. To me, that's the whole idea of illustration. Why we do an illustration rather than just write everything out. Illustrations are sticky. They stay with you, and they will last with you a really long time, and they could change your vote. They could change the way you see the world. We don't know. I don't know if I've ever changed one vote in 50 years, but I've tried to tell true things, and that's good enough for me. I mean,
That actually, and I love that, and I admire that, and I was wondering, I was maybe going to save this question till the end, but I was just curious, like, does political illustration have the same power today that it used to? With people getting so much information from so many different places, some of it wrong, some of it right, some of it you're not sure what to make of. Everyone's in their bubbles. I mean,
the answer is no. It doesn't have the same power, but nothing has the same power. You know, there used to be a man named Walter Cronkite who was on television every night. He gave you the news. And at the end of the news, he'd say, "Well, that's the way it is." And it, if it wasn't on the Cronkite show, it didn't happen. And he was so trusted. This one guy was so trusted that the day he came out and said finally that he thought the Vietnam War was terrible, we should get out of Vietnam, the president at that time, Lyndon Johnson, knew at that moment the jig was up. He couldn't keep the war going. Once you've lost Cronkite, he said, we've lost the war. And so there is nobody on television today, anywhere. Uh, it's all been kind of like shattered into a million little pieces. So here's Fox News carrying the bullshit side, and here's everybody else with smaller, squeakier voices trying to fill in what we don't know, particularly about a story this big. Um, and uh, and the cartoonists used to be very important because newspapers were important, but newspapers are not that important anymore. And there is no single cartoonist today who is as powerful, say, as Feuerbach was in the 50s, 60s, 70s, or Bill Malden when I was growing up, or back in the 19th century, you had Thomas Nast, and he was the most powerful of all because there were very few newspapers. And he was drawing for Harper's Weekly, which ran his pictures full page, double page spread, and were able to focus like a laser on one guy, Boss Tweed, to destroy him with all that power. And it was Nast and Harper's Weekly and the New York Times, which was a young, feisty, uh, insurgent, investigative newspaper at that time, not anything like what it is now. And between the two of them, it was the research and the reporting by the Times and the cartoons by Nast that blew those suckers sky high. And every political cartoonist, I think, has the Thomas Nast fantasy that you're going to come in and clean up the town, you know. And it's not in the cards. What you can do, though, and this is really true. I believe this is true. You can enter the silence when something terrible happens. When there's murder, when there's theft, when there's injustice, racism, fascism, inequality, environmental degradation. When these things are happening, the best thing that can happen for the people who cause these things is for it to be followed by silence. And no one says anything. And that was Hitler's best friend. The Germans were afraid to say anything about Hitler. Well, now we have Herr Hitler, uh, and he is not being met by silence. He is very disappointed that he can't take over easily, and there's a huge resistance out there saying, no, 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 this is really still a democracy, you know, and we still have to have an environmental protection agency, and we still have to have arms control. We have to respect laws. You can't be doing things like abducting children and making deals with other governments to stay in power and lie to the American people. So there's a big battle going on right now, and the it's not any one cartoonist, but I have to tell you, the political cartoonists and caricaturists today are as good as ever. The group that I am with, my gang, I could not be prouder of. You know, the daily cartoonists, Jack Ullman. I'm leaving everybody out, but if they're listening in, I'm including everybody working today. I think you're all great. Uh, Ann Telness, Matt Worker, Matt Boers, the Mats, the Mikes, and the Rob Rogers and uh, oh, lots of everywhere. I think tough times in journalism have caused a big shakeout, and the ones who are left are truly champions. And in our side, illustration is Victor Juhas, Brian Stauffer, Idel Rodriguez, um, uh, Sorrell is still with us, thank God, and Barry Blitt, who won the Pulitzer Prize 2 days ago, and Joe Chardello, just everybody working is great, and uh, there's just less money. That's all. But
It is. I mean, it is impressive to have like that vast array of artists still working and still contributing to the political commentary, especially considering how just challenging. Like, okay, challenging in the sense that like things have become, in my opinion, so surreal that it's hard to satire. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who has that opinion, that to see things from a different angle or still being able to be dug in at, I think that's impressive. So yeah, I mean, as long as there's still truth to be told, or your own personal truths.
draw a face, you know, what all you people do, you just draw a face, but let it come from a place not just of entertainment, but a place of up from other emotions, other needs. Uh, Warning, you're warning people. You're looking for social justice. You're recognizing that the world as it is does not have to be set up this way, and you can contribute to a major rethink, which we're going to have, because you can't survive as a society with 30% unemployment. It cannot function unless there is big social change. And right now, there's tons of money, and it was all given to the Koch brothers and Betsy DeVos and all kinds of other people like that who don't need it. And now we need it. And so in the next months, we're going to have a big election where we reorganize our priorities because we simply have to. There's just no choice. And we can all be a part of that. We're all part of the conversation. We're all saying things. We're all observing, you know, and it's more important than ever when you have an administration totally devoted 24/7 to bullshit. You know, they are shoveling out bullshit at a faster and faster rate. The more they realize they're doomed and they're going down, they're not trying to reform and suddenly get good at what they do. They don't know how to do that. They just know how to be greedy and how to shovel bullshit and hope that since it worked so well in the past when people weren't paying attention, that people will not be paying attention now. And when your mom dies from coronavirus, nobody's going to tell you it's not important. And when you're out of a job for 6 weeks and now you get the message that you're actually fired, you're not furloughed, you're fired, you're not just going to want to watch the game anymore. Of course, there's no game on. NFL is gone. There's no baseball. Although people now are watching South Korean baseball. That's the newest thing.
I hadn't heard that actually. That's interesting.
The day people are tuning into South
Got to get it somewhere.
baseball. So I believe we're entering a new era where people who haven't been paying attention will be, because it's really clear now how serious and severe and dangerous things are. Did that answer your question? I don't even know.
I don't even remember what the question was, but I like the journey. No, yeah.
That question.
So like you know from our previous conversations that you and I see eye to eye on most, if not all, of this stuff. But surely you have people who don't. You know, it's you know even I'm sure there are people who watching this right now might get frustrated that it's that there are partisan politics involved in it. But like, so what do you what's your personal reaction to people who will disagree with you either privately or on some kind of public stage, or people who might not take you seriously as an illustrator because they disagree with your point of view?
I view everything that I state as fact based, and I come from a place of reading a lot and trying to figure out what's real and what's not. And if somebody doesn't agree with me, that's okay. You know, I don't have a problem with that. It's just that right now, if you're going to think that Donald Trump is smart, if you think that Donald Trump is informed, if you think that Donald Trump cares about people, I believe that I'll tell you you're wrong and you have to hear it. You may not like it, but you are wrong, and I'll say it. If you say something racist, I'll say, cut the racism, buddy. And if you feel racism, you have to recognize that you have that in your soul. I believe that is America's great legacy, that we're all born with racism. I don't know of anybody who really wasn't exposed to it as a child. I was. I grew up in working class Brooklyn in the 1950s and 60s, and I won't go into the things I heard from the previous generation about how to look at African Americans and Latinos, and they did not call them by those names. Brooklyn was a melting pot with all these different ethnic groups back then, and I have racism in me that comes from that, and I have to recognize it. But that doesn't mean I'm going to vote for a racist for president, and that doesn't mean that I'm going to support some slob with a gun who thinks he's going to bully a governor and legislators for just looking at science. I don't think there's another side to science. I don't think there's a red science and a blue science. It's just science, you know? So if you want to say there's no climate change and there's no inequality and there's no coronavirus, well, you know, you can deny epidemiology, and you can deny economics, and you can deny climate science. It's going to bite you in the back any day. So I don't have to argue with you. I just say, catch you later. But we live in this time of great emergencies along all those lines. And if you're not upset about them, you're not paying attention. So I'd like everybody to read more and turn off The Bachelorette. Though she's cute. You know, you can't just watch her all the time. It's got to be, you know, you got to watch, you got to read actually, not watch. You got to read stuff. And there's a lot of great journalism, and push the Fox box away and read stuff. Read real journalism. Look at who won Pulitzer Prizes this year. It wasn't Fox News. It wasn't Breitbart. It was the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, the New Yorker, places that hire real journalists. And if anybody wants to ask me what a real journalist is, send me an email, and I'll tell you what makes a real journalist, as opposed to a propagandist. I think we're spending a lot of time on this.
Yeah, well, actually, I was just going to ask you then. Since we were going to talk about your career, I was just curious. Maybe we can start. Which did you get into first? Was it the journalism side of things, or the illustration side of things, or did they just sort of develop at the same time?
As I said, I'm a child of the 50s and 60s. So when the 60s really happened, which was a time simultaneous upheavals of civil rights, war in Vietnam, assassinations, and the space race. If you were my age, which was early teens, you were really paying attention. There was nothing to compete with that. And also, if you were 18, you were terrified you're going to go off to Vietnam and be killed, and that was on everybody's mind because there was a draft there. So everybody was politically active, and the activism reached into the music world. All the music that came out at that time was protest. Most of it was protest music. Woodstock. If you look at the movie Woodstock, you can see that many of those acts were political, as much as they were great musicians. Jimi Hendrix and Joan Baez and the rest of them, and cartoonists and artists. And the New York Times was doing the op art, beginning the op-ed page at that time, and satire on TV. There was an amazing impressionist called David Frye. You can find him on YouTube. He's dead now, but he would not only imitate Nixon, but he looked like Nixon. He could twist his face to look like Richard Nixon. And David Levine did Nixon in the same kind of twisted way. And in the beginning, I kind of like these two guys were the same, two Davids were blending for me into this, kind of overall sense of what satire and caricature was. On TV, you would see it on all the networks, on the Tonight Show and the Smothers Brothers show and the Laugh-In show, and this is late 60s now. And it was very rich for satire and commentary, and nobody was ashamed to say what was on their mind. And that's how it should be. And I think that all that protest did shorten the war. We thought it was going to end the war, but it didn't. But I think it did shorten the war. When it came time for Nixon to be impeached, it reached its crescendo, and that's when I got my start at that time. I was already working at that time, and Nixon was at the end of the road, and I do have some impeachment drawings from way back then. So I was a part of my time, and I do think that young people today are going to be very politically connected just because there's no choice. What's coming is it's not just going to be one election, it's going to be many elections where people are just going to be fed up with this and fed up with radical right-wing politics too, and they're going to be energized as well. So it's not going to be easy.
Yeah, I'm not expecting it to be.
Yeah, no, it'll be a lot of tough times. Get ready.
I mean, we're we're in it, There's no getting out of it right now, right?
here. It has arrived.
Yeah,
Let me flip through some of my work.
please.
Enable me to share the screen. Um, and let me find it. Hang on. Whoa. All right. I need a second to identify this page that I have found. All right. Ready to go.
All right.
I'm going to do this as fast as I can because eventually I'm going to have to eat dinner. All right. You see this?
Says you started screen sharing. There it is. Yep.
Okay. So illustration is storytelling, and storytelling is sort of like cooking. You're putting things together that don't necessarily belong, but now that you put them together, they're delicious. And if they do taste delicious, then you know you've done it. These are elements that don't belong together, but do now in your concoction because they make a third point. An idea is the subatomic particle produced by the collision of two other particles carrying a charge. And here's the illustration that got me really going. I was struggling along for a long time, and uh, Reagan hit a scandal. Can you see this okay?
I can. Yeah.
Reagan hit a scandal after being popular and untouchable for a long time by the press called Iran Contra. So I won awards for a series of pieces, Liars of the Year, and they all had the Pinocchio nose. And that's a very common trope. Everyone's used the Pinocchio thing. But it ain't what you do, it's the way how you do it. And if you can make that nose integral with the skin of the face, that's where caricatural skill comes in. So you see in the beginning, I'm playing with different techniques. This is watercolor. And yeah, I'm using the toothbrush to get that speckled skin texture effect on the face. And this is colored pencil, a prediction about Reagan's Central American policy. He's the bull, but he's the matador also. Um, this is really truncating things, but after about 10 years after graduating college, I snagged a gig on the back page of Esquire. Every month I would do something like this. And I would experiment with different media too. This is scratchboard with acrylic. Top Exxon executives as well soaked animals. In 97, I was sent, I'm sorry, 98, I was sent by Esquire to cover the George W. Bush campaign. He was running for re-election for governor, but everybody sort of knew he was going to run for president. So this was the opener for that story of him riding a horse that looked just like his dad. The idea that
I thought that was very cool. Like
uh,
that horse is unmistakable.
I found out from a pollster after he was nominated that the early polls that in which he was competitive with Al Gore were actually not clear to the people who were being asked which George Bush they were being asked about. What do you think about George Bush for president? Oh, I like Bush. He's good. Yeah, Bush is going to, George Bush? Sure, I like him.
So for this one, were you actually shadowing George W. Bush
Yes.
for this article? What was that experience like?
Um, what was it like? Well, when you're covering a story, you're not trying to destroy anybody. You just want to absorb what's there. You want to meet everybody. You want to show them that you're nice. And I'm this little, um, bald Jewish guy, and no one's going to think that I'm dangerous or out to hurt anyone. So I come on as a very friendly, nice little fellow, and people tend to trust me. And especially if they don't know your work. And back then there was no internet, so they couldn't really check up on you as they could now. I think it'd be more dangerous for me to do this now. But I walked among them. I spent an hour with Karl Rove. I spent about 20 minutes with Bush one-on-one. And I traveled with him with the campaign from one town to another, different events as he campaigned. Very nice guy. He's as you saw him on TV, just a kind of shallow, friendly, sweet guy. Didn't know too much. I found that when it came to local Texas politics, he knew a hell of a lot. He was not stupid. He could tell you about water rights and land management in the context of real issues in Texas. But as president, especially after 9/11, all that was lost. He would have been one of the most important presidents ever if he had followed Karl Rove's plan, which is to broaden the base of the Republican Party and attract blacks and Latinos, because he had a little Spanish and it impressed the hell out of people. He was a very personable guy. When you met him, you liked him. And one of the worst presidents we ever had.
Well, that I want you to be able to continue here, but I'm fascinated. So having spent some time with him and covered him one on one, and having like personal opinions about him as a person, did that make it a challenge to cover him as a president, or were you able to kind of like disconnect that?
No, it's again really caring about what's true. You have to ask yourself what's real. Uh, what is this person really doing? One of the nicest people I ever met and had a great time with was Oliver North in '94 for the New Yorker. I went to cover him as he ran for Senate in Virginia. And he's a friggin' Nazi, you know. This man is far right as you can get. And yet we had dinner together. He likes jazz. He got the guy to put jazz, Dave Brubeck on the jukebox in the restaurant. He likes soft shell crabs. We had nice wine. We were talking about politics. It was fun. Uh, but he knew I was there for the New Yorker. He knew what side of the fence I was on. At the end of the week, he gave me a crushing handshake because he's an ex-Marine, and he said, "Trash me lightly." uh, but he belonged in jail. He was a felon during the Iran-Contra scandal, and he was sprung on a technicality, and so he didn't win the Senate race, and he lost to a real schlemiel, Chuck Robb, who then lost subsequently. But that's a long time ago now. Should I show you my only New Yorker cover ever?
Yeah, let's see it.
It's from 1999, and look how much the New Yorker cost. It was $3. Now I think it's $300. And I'm it's my only cover because I'm not a cover boy. I don't know how to say things gently the way Barry does, and my attempt to do a gentle statement like this is something I'm not proud of. All right, I did one, but I'm not proud of it because I'm saying, look, Gore and Bush and Giuliani and Hillary and Bill Bradley and whoever else, they're all just turkeys, right? It turned out not to be true. Al Gore would have not done the things that Bush did as president. So, um, yeah, I put it up to show I did one.
Still a nice cover.
Thank you. And I don't. It's a cute idea. I think it's a funny idea. Turkey.
I like the parade. Yeah, it's well executed.
But I stopped sending ideas to them a long time ago because it's just one of the things about the New Yorker is that they need their ideas to be indirect, and my ideas are really direct. I'm like blowing people up, and they don't operate that way. They want something that doesn't disturb the horses, and so this is the kind of thing that will disturb the horses. Bush is Mickey Mouse during the Iraq War, and he's remembering a scene from Fantasia when Mickey tries to stop the errant boom. In this case, it's Saddam Hussein, and all the little chips of wood fly into the air and become many more terrorists that were created by that war.
Oh, that's cool.
There's a piece that was killed by the New Yorker, and it was for an article about a man who lost his son in Iraq, and it turned out that it was too strong for that time. The idea of troops coming off the transport and looking up at the sky and seeing the black clouds of destruction from Baghdad was just too much for them. So they killed this piece.
Wow.
And I'm proud of it, but no one ever saw it. Here's Sarah Palin. Uh, this was also for the New Yorker, the idea of finding a metaphor for a personality is always fun. She was doing a TV show at this point. This is after the campaign when she had lost, and she with McCain, and she was doing a TV show about how much fun it is to travel through Alaska with her family, and you see them in the canoe, and you see them hunting and fishing. And as much as I disliked her as a politician, I thought the show was terrific. I really wanted to travel through Alaska with Sarah Palin.
Oh wow.
But anyway, so here's The Hills Are Alive. I thought it would be great to have her as Julie Andrews, and the family all in lederhosen, singing along and having a wonderful time in the great outdoors. Yeah.
I love
Uh,
the family in the background. It's so expressive. And so loose. And yeah, I love it.
this is gouache. This background here is all gouache. And this is watercolor with pencil and pen. And this is pen and ink background. And this is more gouache down below. And so there's nothing digital about this yet. I've since do much more digital stuff with my work, but this is all traditional media.
Yeah, I was
So
going to ask if you made the switch to digital or if you work strictly traditionally these days. But yeah, interesting.
it's still on paper with me, but now, you know, in this case, yeah, I did all these faces in pen and ink under watercolor, but the background, I felt I had total freedom to play with that tone. Is that the exact shade of amber that I want, or do I want it to be a little more pink, or do I want it to be a little more blue? I can play, you know. Do I want this water here to be any call more attention to itself? No, I think that's fine. You know, now you have the option to do that stuff, whereas before you couldn't. And I think that's wonderful. But also, it's nice to have an original. You can sell that to somebody. If
Agreed.
yeah, if it's purely digital, you can't. It's not. You can't. I just had Library of Congress. Very honored to have Library of Congress buy 25 pieces
Wow.
a couple of months ago, and I don't know if they're buying digital files from anybody. Um, Maybe they will, but I was able to pack all these things up and send them off,
That's
and
awesome.
they'll be as pieces of paper. Here's some history things I've been working on. Uh, for a while, I was doing a book on presidents, and who knows, maybe I'll go back. But this is the armistice of 1918 in um, Versailles, and you can see that Clemenceau and Lloyd George and Woodrow Wilson are watering this plant over here, which
Hmm.
is going to become something that will get very big in the future.
Wow.
For the same book on presidents, Reagan taking credit for the end of the Cold War, I thought was very much like Chanticleer, the rooster, taking credit for the rising of the sun. And the sun in this case is Gorbachev's head coming up over the Brandenburg Gate. Now we get to modern times. Oops. Here is a cover for Newsweek of Jeb Bush and family a la Game of Thrones. And that was before Trump happened. It looked very much like it would be Jeb Bush. And that's why we did this cover. The old man was still alive at that time. And I have the family crest on the shield, and Jeb looking especially clueless. They all look pretty to me.
That's
And
that's such a cool Jeb though. Like he kind of has like a nothing face, but you got all this just contortion and expression in it that really sells who he is.
what you want from caricature. You want to draw a face that's really, that's what I tell my students. It's not that thing you're drawing entirely. It's somewhere between that model that you're looking at and you, somewhere in the middle between the subject and the artist. Somewhere in there is what you want. So this is my Jeb, right? This is my George. This is my George W. Um, George W. looks especially stupid in this. The father looks especially worn out and disinterested. And Jeb looks like just a kind of a piece of clay where you put your fingers in, two dots for eyes. You stuck your thumb in there, and there's really not a lot of bone. He never feels like there's any bone in there. It's like this lump of jello.
So something like this then, are you working from, and you've probably drawn all of the bushes hundreds of times over, but are you sort of like putting your own expression into their faces, or are you actually like going off of reference for these, or is it like a kind of a balance of both?
As I just said, it's somewhere between that. Like every caricature is a self-portrait in a way. It's a partial self-portrait. It's him. But first of all, I'm choosing the photograph that gives me the guy that is close to what I'm thinking, the character that I'm seeing in my mind. And then I'm going to push it there all the way. So I know what I want to say beforehand. So I'm going to find the picture of Trump or Jeb Bush that is most, you know, whatever it is I want to get to. And then that makes it easier for me to push it all the way. So it is them plus me, always. They're all self-portraits. Quite often the hands look like my hands because I'm drawing from my own hands. Those are not my hands. This is Chris Christie, and oops, I can't make it go a little, maybe I can reduce it a little in size. Yeah, okay. Chris Christie looked like he might be a major player for the Republican nomination in 2016. So here he is falling off the George Washington Bridge, which you may know he was involved in closing down and inconveniencing severely thousands of people just to get back at a political enemy. So here Humpty Dumpty is about to have a big fall and probably hit somewhere in, I don't know, Washington Heights if he misses the river, in which case everybody would have omelets. Here's process. This is a story
That's cool.
I cover for the Nation about, um, what's the name of the former governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker.
Okay.
The names get away from me these days. And these are different ideas to express this one concept, which is that there's a duality. A lot of illustration is about duality, about the thing that people see in public and then the real person behind the scenes. Hypocrisy is another word for it. So, how do we show that this kind of innocent looking, doltish looking person, or sometimes a smiley, happy person, is actually pretty evil? And there is a lot of public record that shows that he was very connected to the Koch brothers. And even somebody pranked him, I don't know if you remember that, claiming to be Charlie Koch and recording the phone call where Scott was, you know, uh, kowtowing and being very obedient to this actor who was portraying Charlie Koch. Hilarious. So anyway, here are different ideas to show the duality. Uh, Walker, and part of his head is a shark. This one, when I do a mock-up, I'll put the logo to just show what the layout might be. Here's an idea where it's like the movie Alien. Remember the alien is like breathing inside the guy, and they're saying, what's wrong with Louis? And then his chest opens up, and the alien comes out. The baby alien is born. They didn't like that one. Here's one where he's showing himself doing a selfie. So on the selfie, he's Mr. Smiley Face, and then deep down, he's like, no good. All right, so this is the idea they liked. And I like this is the better one also, where the top of his head is lifting up, and you can see peeking out off the top is the really ugly Nixon-like Scott.
Oh, nice.
Here's the final on that. And
Cool.
when the magazine came out, And then also, I got onto that Nixon thing. Said, how could I draw two people in the same drawing? Um, this is the kind of masochist I am. Why bother? Like another thing to stay up all night and try to figure out. Probably impossible. This doesn't do it. That doesn't do it. That doesn't do it. But the art director, Robert Best, was putting up with me, and he sends me this layout. He's believing I can do this, uh, and I did it on some level. This is it to some extent. A Scott Walker Nixon. I gave him it's pretty much Scott Walker, but I gave him the 5 o'clock shadow and the hook nose. He has a long nose, but it's not like a Nixon nose. This is my very first Donald Trump,
Oh wow.
and it goes back. What does it say? 88. All right, so this is what 32 years ago, for a magazine that was very popular for a while called Spy. And Spy was a magazine that was edited by three Yale boys. One of them grew up to be Braden Carter of Vanity Fair, and the other one became Kurt Anderson. And the third guy, uh, I don't know whatever happened to Thomas, was his last name. Anyway, it was a young, vivacious magazine then, and they loved making fun of Trump, and they're the ones who came up with the name Short-Fingered Bulgaria, and never forgot it, and even till up until recently would be sending Kurt Anderson, Braden Carter at Vanity Fair pictures of his hands circled in gold Sharpie to show that he does not have short fingers.
So that's like the history of people ripping on him for having small hands or whatever.
He doesn't have small hands. He has stubby fingers, like misshapen, stubby, little stubby fingers. And but the thing that's great about it is not that he has small hands, but that he's sensitive, and that Graydon Carter got him. He figured out how to get him because, as Trump admitted even in one of the debates, the size of one's hands will tell you how big something else may or may not be. And he cares about that, one would imagine, as well. Okay, so now we get to the Trump campaign. This is 2015. This is for Time. It's supposed to be a cover for Time magazine, but then they made it a full page inside. I'll take it. And so his hot air is filling the balloon as it lifts off into the blue. Village Voice, before it died, was still around for the last election. And so here's Trump as a toy fascist. The camera is photographing the toy, but on the screen, it's big.
And there's so much going on in that picture too. It's awesome. Like
And little Nazis.
yeah, just like I mean, all these little pieces of it that like tell the story, like you were saying. Just a lot to absorb.
Well, and back then there wasn't a lot of this Nazi stuff that was blatant. Those of us paying attention could see it, but it was under the surface, waiting to come out. And boy, did it ever! And I don't think we've seen anything yet. Actually, as he goes down, those Nazis are not going to like it. Um, Also, Village Voice from March of 2016. So this is exactly 4 years ago, a little more. And Jaws. Everybody's done a Jaws idea, but this is mine. This is maybe my most famous idea that I've done. I've seen this projected on the sides of buildings. I've seen this held by people at street demonstrations. And I've seen people get very upset with me and say that you should never use a swastika in an illustration. And my answer to that was, at that time, I said, I'm 61 years old, and this was the first time in 61 years I've ever used a swastika. And I think at this rate, the next time I'll be 120. And I don't think you should worry about it. Anyway, I think this has only gotten more true. Last week when the militiamen appeared moved inside the Michigan State House,
Hmm.
their automatic weapons, a lot of people felt as though we were not that far away from some kind of an event like a burning of a Reichstag. or some kind of putsch in the United States where perhaps some local authority can be overwhelmed by an unexpected turnout of Nazis. And when people don't have enough to eat, the right wing really takes on more power. So watch out, everybody get politically active and occupy the silence. Do not allow silence to follow racism, fascism, Nazism, white supremacy, any of this bullshit. It's not America. We filled the graves of Normandy on D-Day fighting this. That's America, not this.
I love that motto, occupy, enter the silence. I'm going to remember that. I'm going to take that with me.
It's what I do. It's what I think we should be about. We don't have the power to change anything. We do have the power to not let them get away with a moment of silence after someone has done something that is un-American. And here somebody is using it at a demonstration. I covered the convention last time, and that would mean, as I was watching, I've covered 12 conventions, and 8 of them live and in person. But I found that it's better to just sit in the studio and watch TV and draw off the TV and have my assistant sitting over here, and she's scanning everything as I do them. So this was for Village Voice. Every 15 minutes, another drawing comes up, and she would color them a little bit, and I would write the captions, and off we go. This was done also for that, a more elaborate one. And then he gets elected, and here's the inauguration. Chief Justice asks him to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. And what? You mean the Constitution? And he's been struggling with that ever since. So here are things from the Trump administration I've done. Steve Bannon.
That's cool.
I call this talk to the hand. All right. Steve Bannon has given Trump the advice that he is following now, which is to say, flood the zone with shit. That was his advice. Flood the zone with shit. In other words, when people are objecting to what you just did, do 15 other things that they'll object to even more, and they'll forget about the first one. And then the next day, you do 15 more awful things. Kill more people, and then they'll focus on that. And they will forget all the other stuff you did. And he believes that people are that stupid. I don't. People are stupid, but not that stupid. That's too much. This is for a cover for Harper's right after Trump.
Oh, wow.
There was a discussion of the resistance. And these are pitches by me. So this is Fight Club, lining up how the original Trump gang were all at odds with each other and who was who, and sort of like a scorecard with them battling. And down below, you have Trump not giving a damn, just watching himself on television and tweeting. Little iPhones.
Both hands.
And this is one of my year-end things for the Washington Post, where I wrap everything up and I give you legend, where you can look at the number and see what we're drawing about. Too much to discuss here, but this was the first year. Or this was 100 days, I believe. I can't remember now anymore. If this was 100 days or the first year. I've done a lot of them now. But you see the swamp down below with Betsy DeVos, and the White House is an angry Trump head, and here are the kids in the windows all making out like bandits. And up above, you have all kinds of hypocrisy and thievery and fascism, hatred, and intramural battles. Some close-ups. Bannon is got the Muslim ban that a judge is burning. It's all kind of complex. Kim is firing a missile. The Trump care is blowing up. He never was serious about a health care plan for the people. There's Kushner and Bannon having a wrestling, strangling each other. Comey canceling out the Obama wiretap charge. And Ivanka's selling stuff in Eric and Don Jr. and Kellyanne Conway and Spicer and um, the Supreme Court and Meals on Wheels. It just goes on and on. He's
It's crazy to think how much happened just in like this first year, and for you to be able to like condense it into this one beautifully like compositioned image. It's crazy. I mean, there's so much happening, and it's just I look at that now and I'm just like, oh, this is year one. Like,
what am I going to do this year? I mean, it's going to be impossible.
I don't know. We actually have our annual or our quarterly magazine coming out for the spring issue, and we have a really cool cover for it that kind of is along the same lines, where it's like, all right, we want you to capture the what happened to the organization, what happened to the industry, what happened on a national scale, on a global scale, and it's all this tells this big story. It's beautifully illustrated by my friend Mike Grassley, and I can't wait for everyone to see that, because it's kind of the same idea. Like, how do you tell that story? And it's all there on the page.
I My feeling is if you're going to do something like that, you should have one central theme to hang everything on. You know, um, so my central idea was it's the White House, and everything is either sitting on the White House, coming out of the windows, in um, the little pool, the little pond in front of the White House. So it all kind of is anchored onto something. And I'm always thinking about a poster for a movie from 50 years ago, 60 years ago, called "It's a Mad, 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 Mad World," where Jack Davis did this Earth cracking open, and all these crazy characters are coming out. But you know, the chaos and the anarchy is all kind of linked. It's anchored by something. This Earth that's opening up. So there's anarchy, but a certain kind of order, which I like. And yeah, this is more stuff from that. Um, I started to do before the election a portrait of Hillary being inaugurated because she certainly was going to win. And the idea was Hillary's got her hand up, and Bill is there, and is the Chief Justice, and everybody from the campaign, Republicans and Democrats, the whole gang is there watching her being inaugurated, and they're all covered with orange slime because clearly Trump has been defeated and exploded into this shower of orange goo that has now attached itself to everyone. So I was pretty far along with that piece on election day. And then I called my editor at the LA Times, Susan Brenham, and I said, I don't know what the hell to do now. She was shell shocked also. Nobody knew what to do. So I gave it some time, and I started to think about royal families, like the Trump royal family. That's what I wanted to do. So I was looking at this one, which is Goya's very famous, massive portrait. If you've ever been to the Prado, you see this. Um, and King Louis, King Henry, I believe. Let me get the right reference on that. Of Goya's time. And this was a parody that I then adapted to the Trump gang. And of course, here the royal family is only, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 people. Here I had 45 people to draw, but I got them all in. So here you see Trump is kind of like this doughy faced, almost like a slug. I view him as, at least in this case, not even having any bones in his face, just this kind of gelatinous piece of flesh. And there's Tillerson and Flynn and Bannon, and they're gone except for Pence. And here's the whole gang. See what it all looks like. Kellyanne Conway, Reince Priebus, and there's Putin on the right-hand side with his finger touching Trump's shoulder. Got through pretty well. Most of these people have gone. Even Paul Ryan is gone. But Ross is still here. Mnuchin. Pompeo is now Secretary of State. Then he was head of CIA. And here are the delightful Trump children. Uh, and Rudy is back here, Roger Stone, and oh, what's his name from Texas? You know,
Oh yeah, drawing a blank, but I know who you're talking about.
oops, uh, I don't do. Here's Nikki Haley, Elaine Chao, who's Mrs. McConnell, and uh, and here's Chris Christie with Kushner's boot right on his head.
Huh.
That is that he was responsible for helping put Kushner's dad in jail. We're all such crooks, right? Like
Oh wow.
he's getting that guy, and then he gets him back. And so Christie did not become Trump's vice president because of Kushner. And so that's this anyway. A lot
Let
of
me ask you about this one. I do remember when this one came out, and yeah, just being like, blown away by it. But like, given that you were already working on a piece, and then the election went the other way, what was the expected turnaround for this? Like, when was that first piece you were working on supposed to run, and did you have like limited time to get this one done and out?
well, you know, really there was a lot of time because this could have run at the time of the inauguration, which it did.
Okay.
The whole idea was for it to be a an inauguration week feature in the paper. So this thing I was working on with Hillary was going to take its sweet time, um, but this couldn't. This now was on the rails, and I had to really figure out who all was going to be in it, and my editors needed to be okay with that, and they were. You know, it's very important to have relationships, working relationships with people that you really work well with, and that's the case at L.A. Times. Um, and also, you have to be very okay about taking criticism and edits from them. We don't think this guy belongs in here. We should put this other guy in. And if I strongly disagree, I'll tell them that. But usually I don't. Usually I'm I give them some, and I have some of mine. Look, I'm getting 95% of what I want here, which is unheard of. It's not my newspaper, really. I just cut their newspaper, and this they gave this 2 pages on inauguration weekend, which is huge. Think about a standard size newspaper going across double page spread with a legend with all the names.
Yeah.
Uh,
Wow.
it's it's great to have something like that. Here's another wrap up Jurassic Year for Washington Post. Um, I think this is second year, and this one is completely digital except for the line. It's all drawn in pen and ink and brush, and then colored digitally. Um, the level of detail here, let's see if I can zoom in. The level of detail is just so intense that I really could not have modeled this. It needed to just be a drawing that then would accommodate light colors. My idea about coloring things, is that where something is important, number one, that thing should have the strongest tone, and everything else can be a variant of gray. Then you look at your piece and you say, all right, I think it can stand a little red here, a little red here. So I create a kind of a rhythm of reds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, it's getting away from me. Uh, yeah, here are close-ups of it. Betsy DeVos, Manafort, Kislyak. There's no legend here. It's all kind of hand-lettered um, and curled around. Rats coming out of the rocks where you had your Proud Boys in Charlottesville, and Duterte and DeVos and Erdogan and Kim and gangs all here.
So
And
on a piece like this, or just this piece in particular, do you start with the overall composition? Do you work big and then work your way to the component parts, or do you start with like the figures and the characters and build it up?
um, this whole thing was a sketch to start with, and it was a cohesive sketch because even though I wouldn't have like the finished Mitch McConnell as Robin Hood, I would know where he goes. You know, this is like a triangular section in the middle, and this is another triangular section here of Putin with the hands. He's yellow, and so I'm thinking of almost like abstract shapes and where everything goes. So there's a kind of balance. This is balanced by that. This is balanced by that. This is a strong central figure, and you'll notice that this is yellow, and this is yellow, and this is yellow, and this is yellow, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. These rhythms are designed to create balance and to move your eye around the page. So, yeah, it's like a comic. You're thinking about the entire, and you're doing a comic spread. You're thinking about how it looks as a spread, as a single piece of art as a spread, and then also as a single piece of art as a single page, and then each little panel is a single piece of art. So you have to think really in three ways. And I'm thinking this way also, even though there are panels, I'm thinking about balance. It's really a splash page, right? In comics, where there's this big explosive thing that happens, and you are expecting the viewer to spend a little more time with it and investigate it and enjoy it to whatever extent that's possible. But my big thing about color is everything's a variant of gray except for the number one and the number two and then the number three spot. So in this case, number one is really here, number two would be here, three and four and five and six. And then everything else can be a little softer. I don't know if that makes sense, but it eliminates a lot of concern for me because if I were using rich colors, high values all the way through here, it would be totally confusing and impossible to follow.
Oh yeah, and I mean that totally makes sense.
I basically have a black and white mind. And I want colors to behave themselves. I don't want them to get out of hand. In this case, this is White Christmas for LA Times, a parody of that famous movie with Bing Crosby that they play every year, Rosemary Clooney and Danny Kaye. In this case, the Bing Crosby part is played by President Trump, and Danny Kaye is Mike Pence, and they're all coming out and singing on the stage at the end. And hear the little, uh, sugar plum fairies.
You got Trump over there looking a little Grinch-like too.
Yeah, um, I think that's creeping in. And here are all your fascist boys with their torches coming in from Charlottesville. The tree is very ornate with lots of white supremacist and neo-Nazi symbols, including the Confederate flag, Iron Cross, George Wallace, and Facebook. And Putin is the little uh, angel on the top, blowing his little herald, uh, and uh, and then lighting the tree are Milo, what's his name?
Oh, Yiannopoulos.
Or something, and then Spencer. These are two big uh, young Nazis, and they're dressed in lovely gowns. They're lighting the tree with their tiki torches. In the background are Confederate statues in the snow. Remember the movie? The doors open and it's snowing. It's lovely. So here's my big opening, my big finale to the movie. And the Capitol is covered in snow and it's listing. and instead of trees, we have these little uh, hooded snowmen in the snow. Uh, I worked pretty hard on this. You could tell it took a long time, but it was
Yeah.
mighty satisfying because I felt, again, if you're going to be a white supremacist, you must have to endure somebody telling you You must hear the noise that comes from it, not silence. You must hear noise.
Is this something like as you've gone throughout your career, have you noticed your work becoming more complex? Because I feel like that's what I'm kind of seeing here just in the transition, or do you think you've always done a mix of like bigger and smaller pieces?
I think what's happened in my career over the last 10 years is uh, I'm less about getting a call from somebody to do their assignment for them, to fill the space in the publication or online, and much more about thinking, well, what do I want to do? And how can I pitch that someplace? So rather than doing an illustration, as you saw earlier once, this is an entire story. I'm being given credit. I'm getting a byline on these. It's not a credit line on the bottom. It's by Steve Brodner. I wrote it, I pitched it, I did the captions, I designed it, I drew it, and then I send the invoice. It's about 5 different jobs that you have to get good at in order to do this. Uh, but I don't know another way to go, and I enjoy doing jobs for publications, and if we have time, I'll show you some of the other things I've worked on here that are more sketchy things for people. But um, I really like being my own author because it means I'll always work. It means that I'll always be able to have assignments because I'm not waiting around for someone to think of me for something. I think of me for different things, and I know what I'm right for, and I have publications that agree with me that also know what I'm right for, and I consider myself very lucky in this way because this is the work I really want to do more than anything else. This is for Vanity Fair, a portrait of Trump with ex-presidents on the wall looking askance. And as right wing as you like, they're still horrified. George Wallace and Joseph McCarthy, and uh, and then of course Nixon. For the nation, um, this is kind of a triple metaphor. Trump hanging, but he's not just hanging. He's a la Harold Lloyd in Safety Last, which is a famous silent film where Harold Lloyd is forced to scale this building without a net, and he mostly does it actually live in front of the camera.
Oh, wow.
Him to land a platform, but if he was unlucky, he may have bounced off the mattress and gone all the way down. If you ever see that movie, your heart will be in your mouth because it's so real. Um, and he does hang from a clock. There's this clock he grabs and holding on to the hands of the clock. Also, the atomic scientist um, group has this doomsday clock, which as things get more dire, they're able to kind of inch the hand closer to midnight in order to relay the alarm of the moment. Although I don't know what they'll do now. How much further can we get to midnight? Um, that's the only thing that hasn't happened. Nuclear war. We've had everything else.
Yeah, and I think they moved it up like within the last 6 months or something like that.
But they're going to have it past midnight pretty soon. Um, kill you this way, kill you the other way. Anyway, this ran in the nation. You see this part in the middle. This is a completely digitally uh, concocted image to make it look like the actual clock rather than draw it by hand. The rest of it is drawn by hand. This is all pen, pencil, watercolor. You can see the pencil scratches here, colored on paper and after the fact digitally. So for me, digital is just giving you the freedom to decide what looks best to solve a specific problem. This is a story I wrote and pitched to Columbia Journalism Review about how we went from the fairness doctrine to right now where nobody knows what's true anywhere at any time by anyone, all drawn on paper and then colored digitally.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier too. That whole premise of truth and where people find it.
Here's this poor guy. He starts in the beginning. Here's Walter Cronkite, as I mentioned before. One guy on TV, and he's reading the paper. He's happy. He's got his cat, and he's fairly well informed. And now Reagan comes along and slices his TV into red and blue because he ends the fairness doctrine. Now he's got O'Reilly and Sharpton and Hannity and Morning Joe and Roger Ailes and Limbaugh and Annie Coulter. Come back, come back, come back. Here we are. And he's now you see the cat is really upset. Cat is, no longer digging this at all. And so, finally, in the last, it gets worse and worse. And here's the last election with Putin, lock her up, and Muslims and Mexicans, and the poor guy is now screaming, and so is the cat. And then finally, in the last one, make it bigger. Oops. Come on. What did I do to her? I did something terrible to Hillary right there. How do I undo that? Anyway, come back. I'll have to fix that. Here he's got the goggles on for virtual reality, and he's everything is virtual, and the poor kitty is dead. You see, and the kitty couldn't make it. So I use this slideshow when I talk to groups, and what happens when we tell story in pictures. Illustration is the clarifying dream. Everything's kind of a dream or an illusion or a desire picture, a belief system. In other words, there's reality and then there's the alternate reality. There are these two things that are going on. The story is a dream that explodes in the mind of your reader. So if you can make it really vivid for yourself, you can actually put that vision in the mind of someone else, something that illustrators and filmmakers and writers can do. This is something that is about art. All right, so this is an exercise we're not doing today.
Hang on, let me get my pen and paper.
I do a thing called Lego heads, and I do this for anyone, for writers or anyone. All you have to do is make a rectangle, and then you can make a face. And if you follow these directions, you wind up doing faces that kind of look like the person. Likenesses come strangely, and I think that's the end of this slideshow.
This has been an awesome experience. So then I guess we'll wrap it up. But I do have one question, and I think this has an opportunity to kind of feel a little motivational as well. So I'll read it to you in its entirety, and then you can take it from there. How's that sound?
Very good.
Okay, this is from Robin Schwartzman, who is the secretary for the ISCA. She asks, or she states, from a technical perspective, your drawings are unique, lyrical, and executed with such a high level of skill and craft. However, the clear driving factor behind your work is rooted in political satire and social commentary. When you're creating a work and there are so many choices, material and stylistic, subject matter and the overall visual story, how do you prioritize your decisions and find a balance in your execution? And with your constant journey of seeking and sharing truth about heavy topics such as government corruption, climate change, social injustice, and a global pandemic, you ever become hopeless, depressed, or exhausted as an artist and or as a human? Because creating visual interpretations of our many human problems serve as a way for you to personally process events, ignite change, or even find hope.
A lot of questions there.
That's how I responded. I was like, whoa.
The first one is how you process all of this and prioritize what you're going to focus on. And I think it's very much like you live in a house and you have a family. And if anyone has kids, that person knows that it's not always a day at the beach. Problems large and small are always cropping up, and you have to deal with them. Then you realize that something smells funny in the kitchen. And then you walk into the kitchen and you see the kitchen is on fire, and the fire is spreading fast. Are you going to deal with the fact that the dog needs an appointment at the vet to have his toenails clipped? Or are you going to get buckets and put that fire out and call the fire department and get everyone out of the house? I don't think you have to think about that. I think you have to just act. And that's what every day and every night is for me. What is the thing that needs to be talked about right now? Right now, the thing that needs to be talked about is that this virus is spreading, and we have politicians who don't want to admit it. They want to lie and say that, oh, it's all getting better because New York has been following the CDC. And the thing that made New York numbers go down is the thing they're trying not to do in states that are rising. And that's the fire. Then you have an economic fire that's going on where there are no jobs. We're going to have a hot summer, I believe, where people without money are going to be on the streets, and they're not going to be able to sleep in their apartments because, or their homes, because they can't afford the electricity to run AC. It's all going to come down to what is the emergency right now. Sometimes there isn't an emergency, and you have some discretion. You can say, "Yeah, I'll get the dog's claws, nails clipped, and I'll take my daughter to get a new outfit for the party she's going to go to, and I'm going to take my son to soccer." But once the house is on fire, it's your job to not only do your best to put the fire out, but to make sure everybody's safe and to see if there's anybody in the neighborhood who can help you put out the fire, as well as your kids. Teach them to handle buckets. And in this case, the way to put out the fire is for us to tell the truth in everything we do, avoid giving into bullshit, because that is the only tool that they have to fight against being responsible for what they've done. They're shoveling out greater and greater amounts of bullshit. And it's our job as artists, no matter who you are, to be in the anti-bullshit business. And so that's the priority comes from reading the news every day and seeing where the real urgency is and do something with a picture about that. What was the other part of her question? Do I get depressed?
Yeah, and how do you deal with that?
How do I deal with it? Art has always been my best friend. When I was a little boy, I had kind of a trauma with a violent divorce when I was 9 years old by my parents. This was at a time when parents didn't get divorced that much. It was in '63. In fact, my father left the same week Kennedy was shot. So it's all blended together in my mind. Loss of authority, loss of father figure, it was, I could be in therapy for the rest of my life about that. But I learned to deal with that kind of trauma. This man who was mentally ill, my father was a paranoid schizophrenic, and he never wanted to leave, and he had guns. I mean, there's a graphic memoir in this that I can do one day, I think. That's when I started making pictures. The pictures got me through. The pictures took care of me at all stages of my life. Through alienation that came from that in schools, where I lost some friends because I was different now in the neighborhood. They sent me away to religious school when I was 11 years old. That was another trauma for me. I'm not religious, and it made me very suspicious of organized religions of any kind, especially orthodoxies. And I have nothing against Orthodox people, not for me. And I'm suspicious of anyone, who is, for example, going to gather in a religious group when you know that it's going to kill you or it's going to kill somebody to do that because you're learning disabled because of the orthodoxy. Sorry to put it that way, but I have nothing but love in my heart for people, but I want them to be smart and protect themselves and protect their families. The art got me through that. Then after that, I went through high school. Everybody's got something in high school that makes life difficult. And then starting a career as a freelancer. I went through recessions, and I went through wars, and I went through relationships, and I went through divorces, and I went through family problems of various kinds. Different people in my family with mental problems, my own depressions that came and went. It was always the piece of paper and the pencil. So now that we have this trauma, I'm a pro. I've been through so much stuff in my life that I know that if I can draw things and express how I feel, it's healing for me. And my advice and my suggestion to everybody is to keep a journal right now of how you're feeling, how you're doing, put it out on social media. Yeah, no one's going to pay you to do it. Okay. No one's paying anybody to do anything these days. But I think it's important to say it. Art is the way you get through. It's not something you have to get yourself up to create the art. The art is the life raft that you're on to get through this tough time. It's like those guys in Lascaux who did maybe they weren't guys, maybe some of them were women who painted the magnificent animals on the sides of the caves. They were probably trying to get a grip on their fears, or however those fears were translating themselves into some perhaps religious activity. Art is not a frivolous activity. It's not a frivolous adventure. It's a vital form of survival. And so I hope that answers the question. For me, it's the way I've been able to get through it all. And it's the way I'm getting through this. And I'm able to get to sleep every night after I've done a piece of art about it, either drawing a face of someone who's passed or drawing, making clear in some way some piece of hypocrisy or some horror. And I feel I've just added my little bit to the conversation. And I have occupied the silence.
That's great. That's yeah, good place to end it. I think. So yeah, I wish we could give you a standing ovation for that speech, but it's just me right now. So um,
Tolerating me for, I don't know.
on behalf of ISCA, the International Society of Caricature Artists, we thank you for joining us and sharing your wisdom and your history with us. Is there anything that you'd like to plug? You mentioned your classes earlier. Do you want to tell people more about that, where they can find you?
I'll be doing an online caricature class. I've been teaching that in person for the last, it's a summer thing. I've been teaching it at the School of Visual Arts for the last couple of years, but now I'm not going in to school in the summertime. And I don't think a lot of people are going to come to New York to sit in the classroom for 3 hours, even though I'll be well behaved and I'm not going to hug and kiss anybody. I'm still going to wait till things clear up a little bit, maybe the fall, go back to undergrads. But this class, Caricature Boot Camp, I've been teaching it for undergrads this spring because we all had to. And it works. It totally works online. Um, it'll be limited to 20 people, so I don't know how fast it's going to fill up. But by the end of the week, right now, this is Wednesday, the 6th. Is it the 6th?
Yeah.
Uh, by this Friday, the listing should be at sva.edu. So if you are interested in taking the class, or my illustration class, which is also online, teaching how to put illustrations together, just go to sva.edu, go to continuing education, and type my name in, and you'll see both classes come up, and you can read about them. And if you want to ask me any questions about them or anything else we talked about, my email is steve.brodner@gmail.com, and you can send me questions that way. You can also, through my website, if you forget that, it's steve.brodner.com, and you can contact me that way. And otherwise, please keep your arm moving, keep drawing. Don't allow anything to keep you from exploring the great inner worlds that you have, and expand yourself that way, because drawing and writing will do that regardless of what else is happening in the world. Stay informed, read newspapers either physically or online. Be very informed of what's going on. Make sure you're reading real journalism, not BS, because art is about telling the truth. If you can tell the truth in your art will be strong. You agree, Tom?
I do agree.
Okay.
I don't think I've disagreed with a single thing you said.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Uh, Yeah, well, again, thank you for being here. I hope that we get to work with you. ISCA gets to work with you again in the future. Maybe have you at one of our conventions when things get back to normal. Just have you meet the rest of our community because it has been a while. So it'd be great to have you back.
The convention maybe about 17, 18 years ago, and I had a wonderful time in Florida.
Yeah, it's time for an update for you. Time to get you back in the saddle.
Well, I'm around, so please don't be a stranger.
Absolutely, appreciate it. It's been great.
My pleasure. Talk soon.
Yeah, you have a good night.
Stay healthy, please, everybody. Bye.